Hey everybody, I thought I'd do this off the cuff, see what comes out. So on my way to my workout this morning on Sunday, I challenged myself to, during the course of my workout, I was going to try to just go back through my history, through my journey, and see if I could come up with an insight or an idea that I really wish I would have had earlier in my journey, in my career. And I actually came up with what I think that is, and both in the spirit of what that idea is and not wanting to wait to do it later after my workout, after my cool down, change clothes and all that. I thought I'd just do it now. I came back and thought I'd hit the play button and share what I came up with. And so here I am, and it's Sunday, and I'm gonna just call this Super Sunday. Maybe it'll be a thing, I don't know. You know what, tell me what you think about that idea of a Super Sunday conversation, so to speak. So one of the things that I wish I would have unraveled many years ago was that in the effort of building something, whether it be a business, a venture, a team, or yourself, it is largely going to be a conversation around energy. It's going to be a conversation around energy. Now, we tend to describe or abstract the conversation and call it different things, but at the root, it's a conversation around energy. So when we look at what most people perceive as being the challenges to them moving forward, there are basically two large abstractions of this energy conversation that people have. One is time, and they speak about as a deficit, right? I don't have the time in the day to do A and B. I don't have the time in the week, or I just don't have the time in general, or there's just not enough time to do these things that they perceive they need to do to move the building of whatever it is forward. That's a very common conversation that people have, but ultimately that's a conversation around energy. We're gonna come back to that. The other most common conversation people have is around resources. Resources are usually categorized in terms of skill set, people, or money, right? They don't personally have the skill set, the relationships with the people that are required, or the money to move whatever the thing there is building forward. And these are the most conversations people have. Having been an entrepreneur for almost 30 years, having been coaching entrepreneurs for more than half of that, and talking to hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people, these conversations they're almost in everybody's conversation. But what I will tell you is that through the path of these conversations, one thing that jumped out to me over time is that the people that have found their way to leap forward, to climb out of the box of a challenge and to move forward, all have one thing in common. And they were started in what they perceived to be crisis, right? They were very, very urgent. They started the venture, started the business, made the career change, took on a different path for their personal life goal development because they were faced with a crisis. They lost the job unexpectedly, a dramatic change in their family, a death or illness or divorce, something unpredicted or traumatic or tragic from the perspective of the moment. Something health related, but they all started in crisis. And here is the blessing and the curse of it, if you will. They started with a high degree of urgency, and this high degree of urgency pulled up their levels of energy. They were just willing to apply way more energy in a shorter period of time than most people would do without the crisis, without the urgency. And it became apparent to me over time that because their urgency was so high, they never ran into the problem of the lack of time, the lack of the right relationships, the lack of money, the lack of personal skill set, because the high degree of energy they were able to apply towards solving or bridging themselves beyond that as a problem was more than enough. So I'm challenging you to have this conversation with yourself as you look at whatever it is you're trying to build, whether you're trying to build a business, a new business, an idea, a team, yourself, all of the above. Look at what you believe. Write down 5 to 10 things that, if they were in place, your journey to building that thing you want to build would be either guaranteed, more likely, more probable, more pleasant. And then ask yourself a question. Of the things you put on that list of 10 things, if you had to, there was a grave consequences for you not being successful, and taking some of those things off your list by the end of the week, like you had to do it, your life depended on it, or the life of somebody you love depended on it. How would you approach removing those things off the list? Is it possible? Could you do it, right? Has anybody ever been in your similar circumstance that's found a way to do it in spite of having the exact same challenge that you have? These are questions that will shine a light on the answer, because the answer is embedded in the question, and the question around if you had your particular problems in a crisis, in an extreme urgent situation, could you solve them? And in many cases, the answer is yes. So the answer to the question becomes, are you urgent enough? Are you urgent enough? Because if you're not urgent enough around the tasks you need to take, then those tasks will turn into one of those conversations of the lack of applied energy that we call the lack of something else, the lack of time, the lack of resources, people, capital, skill set. This is something that I came to know, and then I started to try to adopt ways to be overly urgent if I could, if it wasn't a real crisis, to just imagine that it was a crisis. Or how would you approach that list of tasks you want to perform, that task of things you need to get done, if you were in an extreme crisis? Would you be approaching them the same way you are approaching them now? And the answer for most people is just no. That's just not we live. It's not even healthy to live in a constant state of crisis, and that's not what I'm suggesting you do. But what I am suggesting you do is use the extreme state, the imagined state of crisis, if you're not in one or don't have one, as the range within that you're working, and use that as the bar that you gauge your process against. You're in the conversation of energy, nothing else, just the conversation of energy applied to solving your problem, to moving to the next step. Are you applying enough urgency? That would have been incredibly helpful for me had I adopted this mindset earlier. Now, since I become aware of that, when I compare myself to other people I know doing similar things, similar project, I come across as being way more urgent in my action and my activity, because I'm conscious of it, I'm aware of it, and I realized, how do I increase my urgency in this? What can I do today? Regardless of how uncomfortable it is, I don't feel like doing it. Like, is there anything on my list that I can take off of my list today, right? Or this week, or this month, right? You'll be surprised at how many people have this huge list of things they know they need to do. And you'll be surprised at how many people out there have things on their list today that they could take off of their list today that they're not going to do today. And if you were to ask them tomorrow why those things are on their list, the answer is going to be they didn't have the time, they didn't have the fill in the blank. But when you go back to exploring what they did today, there's going to be TV shows and Netflix and all kind of things, right? So we know that in the truthful conversation with themselves, that the reason they're giving for not being able to do things is not 100% truthful. It's a conversation around energy. And most of us have the conversation around lack of energy that we described as something else. But when we describe it as something else, it's easier for us to take that as an excuse. When we say, I call my lack of energy my lack of capital. I call my lack of energy my lack of skill set. I call my lack of energy my lack of relationships with people that I need to know. When we have that conversation, it's easier for us to accept our own lack of energy excuse as an acceptable excuse, where there's nothing I can do about it, or at least there's nothing I can do about it at the moment. But if you were extremely urgent, that would not be a truthful answer. So that's what I came up with. I thought I'd just share it in a moment. And now I'm going to get back on my other path and go get my Sunday workout in. But welcome to maybe the one and only. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be a thing, but it sounds cool from a branding perspective. Super Sunday. That sounds like